to present my friend, former constable, current Sheriff of Harris County, Ron Hickman. Sheriff Ron Hickman began his career in law enforcement after graduating from the Houston Police Department Training Academy in June of 1971. When you see people run for office for law enforcement who haven't either done much, who haven't had the kind of command I'm going to read about, let that bother you. What do you see what he's done? Serving the Houston Police Department as an underwater search and recovery officer, a bomb squad technician, and later in the Planning and Research Division, Sheriff Hickman was exposed to a variety of law enforcement assignments early in his career. While assigned to the HPD Planning and Research Division, Hickman discovered a career-long passion for building computer systems to aid law enforcement operations. In 1983, Hickman began a career with the Precinct 4 Constable's Office, where he was quickly promoted to sergeant. Since that time, Sheriff Hickman has fought to improve the standards of law enforcement computerization, communication, and automation. In November of 2000, Hickman was elected Constable of Precinct 4. He took office on January 1 of the following year. As Constable, Hickman sought to meet the community's needs and address opportunities to enhance county-wide law enforcement operations. In March of 2013, then Constable Hickman was named National Constable of the Year by the National Constables and Marshals Association for the second time. Hickman had previously been awarded the same honors in 2007. In 2006, he was named Texas Constable of the Year by the state's Justices of the Peace and Constables Association. Sheriff Hickman is a graduate of the state's Justices of the Peace and Constables Association. Sheriff Hickman is a graduate of the University of Alabama. Roll Tide, yes. The Law Enforcement Management Institute of Texas, and is a 2014 graduate from the prestigious FBI National Academy. In May of 2015, Ron Hickman was appointed sheriff by Harris County Commissioner's Court, joined by his wife Connie, who is a Navarro County Justice of the Peace. Sheriff Hickman has remained a pillar in his local and faith-based communities and amongst the law enforcement professionals of Texas and Harris County. Will you please welcome our sheriff, Ron Hickman.
Thank you so much. You know, you could summarize that in a couple of sentences. Old guy, been there, done that. Unfortunately, that's the abridged version of my bio. You know, after almost 45 years, you'd have to expect I've been involved in an awful lot of stuff. And fortunately for me, I've had a great career and had so many opportunities to learn and contribute. And most of what all of us in our profession do is look for an opportunity where we can contribute in an area where we enjoy. And I'm so blessed to have been worked around men and women who really are so committed and dedicated to serving law enforcement. The constable's office, and most of these guys here are guys that we trained up and raised and watched to grow into the next generation of leadership, some of them in current generation leadership. So I'm very proud of them and overwhelmingly proud of the sheriff's office. When I walked in, I had already been exposed to many the people at the sheriff's office. Many of them were long-term friends of mine, and now you understand why the department continues to move forward and do what it does, because it has some of the best people in the business anywhere in this state. So I'm very proud of all of them. Let's talk just a minute about how complex county government really is. As it was mentioned a while ago, this county's looking forward to a bond election, and the way counties are able to function involves a tremendous amount of decision-making and input from our Commissioner's Court and the community. So I encourage all of you to do due diligence and do your research on this bond election. It affects the infrastructure of how the county operates, how it's able to provide the service needs, help you with roads and bridges and all the other things that you require every single day. So do get involved in studying those things. For a few minutes today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the complex organism that is your Harris County Sheriff's Office and what my vision is on moving it forward. Unfortunately, my view of the past was that we had somewhat dysfunctional law enforcement family. And, I was always been about bridge building, making sure that we all were able to work together. I came from the Houston Police Department many moons ago, and I had still a lot of friends over there. But we see obstacles to our ability to being able to communicate effectively. Many years ago, probably 10 or more, Larry and I worked on the ability for us to communicate by radio with HPD. And we kept hitting stone walls. We got blocked time and time again. Because, it isn't as simple as you and a friend picking up a phone and calling each other. If your phone won't work with the other, you can buy one phone and fix it. But for us in the city of Houston, we're both mammoth organizations. The amount of money it takes to fix a communications problem sometimes is very large. So it took quite a while to work through those very complex decisions, and we're able now to work out a radio system that is much more complex, but much more feature-rich, and allows us to communicate with multiple entities throughout the region. So by beginning very early on and getting engaged, we're able to accomplish that. The Sheriff's Department is a $442 million business that you pay for. And one of the things that very early on I wanted to know is how we could do a better job of spending your money so that we didn't continually go back and ask for more. I was the recipient of some of that attention some years ago as the county took a downturn in the economy. I had to lay off 100 of my officers. So I'm a little sensitive to how our agencies use the money that's given us. Because let's face it, there's never enough. I don't care how much money you threw at us, we can find ways to spend it. So our job is to make sure that we're not wasting it and that our business practices follow reasonable models. So I wanted to sit down and I studied for a long time. And I worked with the budget officer and working with Commissioner's Court to come up with a business plan that appeared to drive a better level of success for us. So this $442 million entity is fluid. Money runs back and forth just like people run back and forth. And so it's very hard to keep track of where everybody is and where the money is when things are fluid. Over on the far right-hand side is our medical services. I hire and fire doctors and nurses, psychologists and pharmacists and dentists. I have 6 dialysis chairs in my jail. So the medical part of our facility is under me. And whether it should be or not, if you ask me, I put a big red X on that box and give that to somebody else. Commissioner's offices, hint, hint. But regardless, we need to find a way so that it doesn't negatively impact the remainder of the department. $22 million of that 60 goes for mental health. You run the largest mental health facility in Texas inside the Harris County Jail. 25% of all of the 9,000 prisoners that we have are on psychotropic drugs. There are 3 dosages. Any doctors in here? There are 3 dosages of Abilify. You've heard about it. And they are among the top 5 most expensive drugs that we provide. And 25% of our population is on them. HIV medication. Number 2 on the list of most expensive drugs. 1% of our jail population is HIV positive. And according to the law, whatever prescriptions they are on when they walk in the door, we have to maintain. So we're consistent. We freeze whatever their medication is, continue it. We can't make them take it. So if you don't like the way a psychotropic makes you feel, you can decline it. But I have to provide it, just like I have to provide a certain level of nutrition. I throw away $1 million worth of food every year because they don't want to eat healthy stuff. Law says I have to provide it. So fruit, vegetables, all that stuff. I don't feel like eating that, so I want to run down to the commissary and I buy chips and crackers and cookies. That's their choice. So $60 million of your money goes to provide medical care for inmates. The law says I have to provide a reasonable standard of care. Doesn't say anything about me sending a deputy to your house today, but I have to do that. So we're looking very hard about how we can control costs. We spend over $12 million a year in pharmaceuticals. 4.6 of that, HIV medicine. The least cost control in the business is in pharmaceuticals. The costs vary widely. So we're not able to estimate and budget very accurately when cost controls are that bad. So costs go way high. So we're probably $6 million over in our pharmaceutical costs this year. So where did that money come from? Way over on the left-hand side, are the guys that go to your house when you call for public service. So there's a bucket of money over here for fleet, for fuel, for payroll. So let's just slide some of that money over here and fill up that pharmaceutical gap. So at the end of the year, when I need to buy more cars and take care of my fuel bill, I'm a little short. So we came up with a plan on how we could control those business centers for costs to keep us from being rated more or less in other areas of the department. So one area of the department has a negative drain on the other. And that's a very poor business model. And those of you in business would go bankrupt trying to do that. So I set about trying to work up this, and first and foremost, you have to find out where people are. One of the biggest surprises for me, you know, I'm kind of a techie guy. So I come over from a 500-man department to a 5,000-man department, and I used to have a zero on the back of everything I did. I had a $40 million budget, now I have a $440 million. 500 to 5,000. So I thought, wow, this group is going to be on top of things. They'll be highly automated. They'll be in touch with all their information needs and their data, and found out we are a paper-driven organization. My payroll files are in these big sliding cabinets. We were recently subpoenaed by our Commission on Law Enforcement in Austin to provide them with 1,000 sheets, one page out of 1,000 personnel files. So we put a whole group of people pulling one page of paper out of 1,000 files. If that had been automated and scanned, we could have done it in a few minutes. But no. The detention officers and jailers who work in the jail, supposed to check every cell twice a day on their shift. A lot of card. Yeah, he's there. Yeah, he's there. Turn those cards in. Well, there are 9,000 inmates and hundreds, probably 3,000 people working in the jail. Can you imagine the stack of cards on their rounds every day? And trying to keep up with all that. So, it is not as highly automated as I thought. So we've undertaken challenges. When I walked in, I'm looking at how these expenditures are going on. Well, we were paying last year's bills when I walked in. So what are you going to do about this year's bills? You have to break even at some point, or government doesn't function. So we're working with the budget office instead of against it, working with commissions to identify our priorities and our needs to provide better services to you instead of working against them. So we've got to have opportunities to leverage our relationships. We have very supportive commissioners. Talk with them. They want to know what your needs are. They want to know how we can serve our community better in a cooperative fashion. One of my chief concerns over the years has been the competition in law enforcement rather than the support that you expect. So that stuff is dead. It's history. Our job now is to make sure all of us in all of our agencies have a cooperative spirit. Unfortunately, all the guys that are on top of all these agencies, David and all of them, from the Fire Marshal Montgomery, David, all of us have been out here for years in this community and are all friends. So you can pick up the phone and say, I need, or I want. And it happens. Simple as that. So we have a cooperative spirit among law enforcement these days, which is absolutely essential for us to provide proper service to you. These numbers over on the left, this is the actual number of uniformed personnel that respond to your calls for service in the Sheriff's Office. Countywide, the unincorporated area of Harris County is the equivalent in size and population to the city of Houston. In the very soon order, we will surpass the city of Houston in population. If we were a city, and the Commissioner's Office says this often, we would be the 5th largest city in the United States, the unincorporated part of Harris County. Monstrous population. The Sheriff's Office has 715 people responding to your calls for service, countywide, 5 districts. Doesn't take much to split that over 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, and you're pretty slim. If it wasn't for our law enforcement partners with constables who act as force multipliers to what we do, it'd be very difficult for us. Our population has grown exponentially, probably 250,000 in the last 5 years alone. These numbers are not getting any higher. Where are they going? Over here in this second block, where we're babysitting those prisoners. Our average daily population is between 8,800 and 9,000 per day. 6,600 of those haven't been to trial yet. I did an aging report Monday. I have a guy that's been in jail 6 years, waiting for trial. Long time. So our entire justice community is looking at different ways. An effort led by Commissioner L. Franco Lee, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, involves all levels of government that is involved in the justice community, from the front end where we arrest them, all the way through the DA and the courts, all the way out to adult probation, to find ways to make it more efficient so that it doesn't have a disparate impact on minorities. And why do we have so many young black men in jail that couldn't get out on bond? We have to look at all these things to find out why we have a high degree of recidivism. Why can't we get them back out earning money and supporting their families rather than sitting in jail? Tremendous number of influences that affect every step along the way. The county was the recipient of the MacArthur Foundation grant in May, and they've begun studying all these different areas so they can report back to us where they can find and recommend improvements in the process. So we're very hopeful that we will be able to lower the number of people in jail, lower recidivism. We're currently involved in a project with the University of Houston where their caseworkers come into our jail and develop a re-entry program. Harris County Jail has 17 different vocational efforts to try to teach them new skill sets. Well, if I grow up with somebody say a poor parenting model, and I develop the skill sets of breaking into houses and selling drugs, if I can't make money any other way, what am I going to fall back on? My skill set. Well, we teach them 17 different things they can do to get certified. We certify them with welders, carpenters, auto body mechanics, computer skills. We've graduated 18,000 people out of those programs. But if we don't get them into a proper reentry mode to get back into the community, guess what they're going to default back to? Back to those other skill sets. So we're looking at all kinds of creative ways to make sure that our participation in our part of the justice community is a successful one. That reentry program has a 5% recidivism rate. Most of the recidivism is probably between 60 and 80%. So that's a successful program. Very proud of it. So looking at the detention, our configuration drives our demand. We have to have a ratio of 48-1, 48 prisoners for every guard. So that means I got to have bodies to watch those people. Yeah, well, you know, about 3,000 employees, 9,000, that's a pretty high ratio. But you have to remember that somebody has to feed those people. Somebody's got to wash their linens. Somebody has to move them to and from the courts, to and from the hospital. So you have all these different layers of support underneath the guy that watches him in his cell. So you have, like, it's kind of like the sports teams. You know, you have to have 3 deep for every position on the field. We have to be there. We have to have 3 deep. Because a defense attorney comes in and says, I want to see my client. One of my guards has to take him to the interview room. That means he's no longer on his position. If he has to go to a clinic visit, or a hospital, or court, somebody has to take him. So all those things require tremendous support. Courts is another important part of what we do. We have 91 courts, and before the end of the year, we'll have 4 more. We'll have 95. So we have to have 100 or better people that watch just the bailiff of the courts. And some of those courts have court masters who hold separate functions. So we're beefing up our court section to make sure that they're able to run a court process efficiently without, you know, outbursts and issues that complicate the court. So we've got, I think, 154 employees just in the court section alone. You know, we'll be right at 100 courts countywide here pretty quick. You know, when you go to the ballot, it seems like you never get out of the court section until you get down to that JP 42. So all of these things will will drive us towards a more effective business model. And it is a lot of money, but it's also a lot of people. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of people to do all these things. This is the breakdown of the department, and it was a mammoth undertaking to figure this out in a short period of time, because in an organization of 5,000 people, there's always a lot of movement. So you're chasing these people to find out where they are and what they're doing. We have 2 primary missions for our department. We care for the people that are in our custody. We don't rehabilitate, we don't punish, we just care for them. And so we want to make sure that the folks who work for us understand that responsibility. We all just paid about $500,000 to settle a lawsuit where an individual was locked away for a month and a half. That's not care. You can't even call it care. We didn't train our employees as detention officers. If they were 18 years old and they could get to the front door, we would hire them. No physical requirements whatsoever, no educational requirements. Set you in front of a computer for 2 weeks and you're a detention officer. Have a nice time. That does not breed a very serious understanding. I don't know about you, but I don't want my pilot or my proctologist doing virtual learning. That is the sole source of learning. Not always effective, shall we say. So we began, for the first time since 2009, our own Harris County Sheriff's Basic Corrections class. We have reopened the Harris County Sheriff's Academy and graduated the first class on Friday last week. So now we are training them to understand what their responsibility is in the care of the inmates in our custody. In November, we'll open the first basic peace officer class that the Sheriff's Office has held since 2009. We get students from the University of Houston, Lone Star College, Houston Community College, but 1 in 5 of them fail. 20% failure rate. So we want to make sure that the employees that we get come through our process, understand our way of thinking and our mission to serve you. And that's not been happening. So we want a more effective output. So these guys, the top command, are experienced people. They have 620 years of experience among us. A bunch of old guys with lots of drugs. The top 2 guys under detention, Skip Oliver, 36 years at the Sheriff's Office. Todd Montefusco, Mike Smith, the chief and the major in the jail, 85 years experience between them. So all you gotta do is tell them what you want to do and get out of their way. These are people with real experience in this department who understand what your mission is and how to get it done. You can't find a more effective business model than that. Jim Sumner, Jim's father was a sheriff's deputy for many, many years. He's been with me probably 30 years. He's in charge of 1,600 people in the law enforcement command. He's a cop. Knows how cops work, knows how the other agencies work, has a great relationship with everybody in the law enforcement community. Skip Oliver is over the Detective Bureau. Skip was a major under Tommy Thomas, raised up at the Sheriff's Office, well respected by his peers, knows where we want to go. My Chief Deputy, Tim Cannon, started at the Harris County Sheriff's Office, another 30-year officer, does an excellent job. Everybody, I think, except Skip and Todd are FBI National Academy graduates. So you have a tremendous wealth of experience right there in this department. They know what they're doing. So there's a lot of folks here. On the medical side over here, you see all these different kinds of occupations. Radiology techs, RN psych techs. There are a little over 800 positions in the medical side. Part-time, full-time, contract, lots of bodies. This is a 50-slide presentation. So we broke it down into where the money is by bureau. So we know exactly what personnel it takes to run it and how much it costs. Very simple business approach. You see the big green slices. Pharmaceutical spending. We spend a tremendous amount of money in pharmaceuticals. And another one of those areas where the systems don't provide a tremendous amount of information. We know what we're prescribing, not so much on what we dispense. That could be problematic. There's your cost of medical service and mental health, a little better than $22 billion. The red bars are overtime. 2009, we spent $24 million in overtime. Because we had just under 12,000, I think, prisoners per day. More prisoners means more people to watch them. If you don't have enough full-time people, you got to pull people in overtime, which is very complicated. So you've seen overtime begin to drop. The red line up on the top is employees. There's been a national trend downwards, as the captain mentioned earlier, in crime. Following that will be a national trend downward, number of people in jail. So you can see employment didn't change much. So there wasn't a lot that was affecting that internally, just a national trend. Just like the seasonal trends we see in jail population. When I walked in the door in May, we had 8,700 prisoners. 30 days later, oh my God, the jail's overcrowded. We got better than 9,000. Well, how does that happen? Kids get out of school, get in trouble. There are seasonal trends. Summer gets hot, people drink more beer. Problems. Well, September's come. Things are starting to cool off. Guess what happens? Jail population starts to drop. Kids are back in school. People got to be home and watch them. Less problems. So now jail population is trending down. Do we do anything to cause that? Sure, I got a magic wand. Boom, September, jail population goes down. So that's where it goes. That's how the money works. Medical overtime, you see, has been on the slight increase. But most of that's driven because we have a tough time finding people who want to work in the medical business in the jail. You know, you look out in professions for the future where we need staffing. That's what community colleges live on. We know we need to train up people in this category. Welders are one of them, right? We need welders. One of them we need, psychologists and psychiatrists. You know, we can't find enough of them, period, let alone enough of them that want to work in the jail in an inmate environment. The Department of Justice has a scrutiny over the Harris County Jail, has had for quite some time. So they come in and look at us and our practices and they make recommendations. One of the recommendations is they would love to see inmates who need psychiatric care have individual therapy. Well, that's really nice. Imagine how many therapists that would take. About $2 million worth. We got those numbers this week. So where do you find that many? We go to the University of Texas Health Sciences Center. How many are in your next class? Well, we doubled it. Great. How many is that? We went from 6 to 12. Whoa! A whole new generation of therapists. 12. Reckon any of them want to work in the jail? Maybe not. Maybe not. So, we are confronted with a variety of different challenges across the spectrum when it comes to medical issues, overtime issues, all of which you pay for. This is the number of jail housing population, also based against overtime. As you can see, the natural trend still goes down. Outsourcing. 60 days ago, you heard that I sent 100 inmates to the jail facility in Jefferson County and 100 to Waco. It is literally cheaper for me to send inmates out of town than to pay overtime to watch them here. So I said, well, if we're going to do that, who do you pick? Well, obviously you start with those that have the least impact. On a daily basis, we have about 500 prisoners who are on their way to prison. They're paper ready, we're just waiting for them to be picked up. And TDC is about 3 weeks behind most of the time. So why not take those 500 and take some of them and let them be picked up from somewhere else, free up some bed space. So we moved 100 here and 100 there and freed up 200 beds. That keeps us from being overcrowded. In our business, being overcrowded is a bad thing. Texas jail standards kind of gets cranky about that stuff. So I'm considering sending 500 out to be able to free up enough bed space for me to close one of the smaller jails. We have 3 different facilities. And the design and architecture of those facilities drives in large part how many people it takes to watch the prisoners. If they were on one big pen, Joe Arpaio over in Arizona has an outside yard where they put tents and all that stuff, right? So your ability to watch them in a yard requires less people. Put them up on a pickup with a rifle, it's easier. Ours has a hallway and pods, so our configuration design impacts that. So if I can close one of those little facilities that's being run on overtime, saves us a lot of money. That would be a great business move to do that. So we're working on those kinds of designs to try to fix that. So moving them out is not necessarily a bad thing. Oh, we jumped to 50. How about that? Yeah. It's a good business practice. You know, when they get to prison, they're not going to get visitation right away anyway. So let's move them somewhere that's beneficial to us and beneficial to you, and save money in the process. So my hope is by doing that, we can close what we call 1307 jails, Baby Baker, because it's across the street. It is a minimum risk facility designed for misdemeanor prisoners, low risk people. So I have about 600 empty beds that I can't use. You can't put a high risk prisoner in a low risk bed. That's a worse violation than going over the population cap. So I would prefer to take all of those, about 400 of them, and put them in the bigger jail and close the little one because it's run on overtime. Save us a lot of money. Let's talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're working on. You know, obviously, as a former Houston officer, former constable, I have a tremendous interest in improving the level of data sharing we have between the agencies. In this region, we know criminals do not respect jurisdiction. Most of the crooks we catch out here come from Southwest Houston. Run on the way up to Magnolia, Decker Prairie. So why is it that we have these huge silos of information with these major walls that we can't get to? Why are we hiding information from other cops? So we had an agreement worked out. Houston Police Department, Harris County, all Harris County law enforcement, Pasadena PD, Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office, Missouri City, Sugar Land, Chambers, all have the same kind of computer system, same vendor. So why don't we leverage that to share data? So we're going to come up with a method for a regional crime analysis system. Had a grant for the Homeland Security Department called the UASI grant, Urban Area Safety Initiative, for $1.5 million to create this regional crime analysis. And somebody in the previous administration would prefer to buy a computer. So we lost that opportunity. The city of Houston used it and started a lighter version of crime analysis on the region. So why not take the opportunity now, since we know we have these relationships, we know we have these same systems, to open the link and let us look at each other's data. Tim Ottmeyer is an administrative assistant chief for the city of Houston, a longtime friend. We got together with the constables, sheriff's techie people, city techie people, and say, how do we do this? So we came up with an agreement. Harris County will buy an appliance. It's basically a black box. It costs about $100 grand. And you feed it information and tell it where you want it to go look. So if we open the window and let it look at Houston's records, and it comes back and looks at Harris County's records, then it can start making comparisons and relationships. Hey, we had a crook that did this over in Houston. Well, he did that over in Harris County too. Well, by the way, he's married to this guy's sister. And they drive a red pickup truck that was used in that offense. So start tying this stuff together. Well, then you incrementally expand your search. You start looking in Pasadena, Fort Bend County, and that's just the people with the same system. So we're going to develop the most comprehensive tool ever conceived in Texas for intelligence level kind of work. It's not really complicated. The hardest thing to do is that window open so we can get in. Now, obviously, there are cases that are absolutely confidential. You don't want to share that kind of stuff because it's an ongoing, active investigation that could be damaged. But we're not going to allow people to create copies of anything. We'll present them something they can view, and then it goes away. You make your relationships, you develop your leads, and you work on it from there. So they won't be able to replicate the data. So nobody will ever say, well, here's a copy of their report. It can't happen that way. There are safeguards to prevent it. So my hope is as we replicate this, pretty soon Jersey Village is going to come knocking. Hey, I want that. Humble PD. We want that. Good. We all share. Everybody wins. It makes us that much more effective in what we do. The average street cop who's researching stuff out there, trying to find out where that property went that was in this burglary, gets all this information. The county owns a tremendous volume of data. Tax assessor, district clerk, county clerk have already agreed to allow us into theirs. So now we just got to go to HCAD, adult probation, justice courts. Who knew crooks get tickets? Can you imagine if we ran a partial suspect search through the JP index machine? What a wealth of information. We just don't use it intelligently. We need to. Speaking of intelligence, one of my pet projects is predictive analytics, using data to do a better job on our deployment strategies. If a burglary happened over here 2 weeks ago, and one happened here last week, which direction would you go for the next one? Probably over here, not back over there. So we have algorithms that will tell us through heat maps where things are going, based on temporal influences, geographic influences, all kinds of different things. That intelligence will help us. So rather than us wasting our time driving around back there by the park or the school, our patrol might better be suited maybe in the back of the subdivision, where things are going to trend to be crime problems. So we're developing those tools, adding that to the suite of things that cops do. Another little pet project. I'm glad Lieutenant Henry's here. You mentioned earlier our homeless outreach team. I met with Bob before I ever became sheriff. I started a conversation about what he was doing with this crisis response team. And he mentioned this homeless outreach effort. And you know, my job as leader is not to come up with all the good ideas. My job is to find them, promote them, and make them work. So I said, well, you know, that's a really good idea. Why don't I partner up one of my guys who has access to public funding and develop a public-private partnership? He hooks up with the trust. They give us about $100,000 to provide the equipment to staff, resource, and outfit a homeless outreach team. As the city of Houston begins to work on their issues, unfortunately what they wind up doing is driving homeless out here. They do a homeless census annually in the unincorporated area. We're somewhere around 5,000.
Yes, sir.
In the unincorporated Harris County. You would see them up and down 1960. Panhandling, all kinds of stuff. They get involved in thefts and prostitution and all kinds of issues up and down the freeway. What they wind up is being dumped in Harris County Jail as the default solution for a very difficult social problem. So his concept was to develop an outreach team. So he looked at City of Houston, who has a very successful outreach team, and they're great partners. Looked at San Antonio, as a very successful outreach team. So through their resources, they began a conversation with the Sobering Center, the MHMRA for counseling and therapy services. They can get them 3 hots in a cot. Try to talk about vocational opportunities for them. Some segment of that population has mental health issues. Some of them are veterans. And I think we can do a better job of providing solutions for this problem that aren't involved in putting them in jail. So this is a diversion program that keeps you from spending money housing people in jail that have other issues that we just can't find solutions for. So when you deal with a public-private partnership, the demand on us is fairly low. The impact on you all is fairly high. So the cost yield is excellent. So if this becomes a very successful project, then we'll want to implement it in other places around the county. We partnered up with the Harris County Sheriff's Foundation as the conduit for the money from the private trust because they help fund efforts through the Sheriff's Office. The foundation is completely independent of us. So they're the conduit for the funds. And it aligns them with us much more closely to support this effort. So the equipment is being outfitted now. So we've gotten ATVs and vans and that kind of stuff. So they will actively go out to homeless camps, to under bridges and overpasses and stuff to find folks and offer them water. They'll offer them supplies, sanitary stuff, and try to coax them into participating in this effort. We can't make them go. Did you get your portable APHIS machine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. One of the issues we have And a number of these homeless folks are very successful at hiding their identity. I mean, over the years, they've lost every piece of identification they ever had, right? So my name's John Doe. Prove it. Well, all we have is their thumbprint, right? Or dental records when they're dead. Try to find out who they are. So we provided them with these portable APHIS devices about the size of a cell phone, but they will tie to the national database and identify these people. You know, and identification is a major issue for them because getting them services, and many times, is connected to being able to identify them. You know, a guy will tell you he did two tours of duty in the military, and you can get him some services if you can get him some identity. So they're working with different means to help get them identification that will at least take them to a minimum level of service. That's an excellent project. I'm really proud of John's group and John for coming up with this, because it helps us provide a solution in an area that all we ever do is just dump them in jail. Keep dumping them in jail, and then they just keep going in the cycle, out, in the cycle, out. And that's not really fixing anything. So, in the long run, we're very proud of it, and proud of John for coming up with it, and we're happy to do everything we can to support it. And we're very proud of his team. I don't tie up the entire day because you don't give a politician a microphone and expect them to walk away quick. So. We ask some questions?
Ron, are you making this talk all over Harris County?
Yeah. I'm on the talking circuit.
Are you finding time for it?
Yeah, I was at the chamber last week, here this morning. I'll line up tonight with Tom Ball at 7 o'clock. I'm out at least 2 or 3 days a week. And we're really talking about this business approach. We meet frequently with the budget office to make sure we're all heading the same direction. It looks very promising, but in the end, as commissioners look at the county's overall priorities, they have to decide how to divide the pie. You know, as much as I would like to get all of it, that's not going to happen.
Ron, I'd love to stay, but I have to go.
We'll get your hug on the way out.
It's a two-way street in regards to what excellent job you all do. What should the community be doing to help you do a better job?
Well, I mean, there are a number of things the community can do. Obviously, you are a large part of the eyes and ears and ambassadors that law enforcement has in the community. You know, and remember, at the root core of what we do, all of us care about the same thing. You get the level of service you need for the problem you have at the moment. You know, we want to provide a safer community. We want to provide resolution to crime. We'd like to deter crime, disrupt crime, criminal cycles. So any information that you have is value to us. We have to decide what value as we move forward. But providing eyes and ears in the community. And my next door neighbor said, this happened. Well, from my experience, this is why those things happen. Rather than allowing people to develop a negative attitude, support a positive one. You know this is the way we do things. Many of our departments have citizens police academies where people go to experience and understand exactly how we operate, why we do things. And many of them, Ken and all these guys have been through those things. So as you learn and are able to explain, as people start making negative comments about, well, why the cops do that, why do they do this, you understand and can offset that with a positive comment. You see things that are happening, you can let us know. You've got neighbors that you have a responsibility to, letting us know when things are happening. Encouraging your neighbor not to leave papers on their front lawn for a week. Those kind of things all make a difference in our communities. Kevin.
Complete. What do you need our state legislators to do or not to do in Austin to allow you to better protect our community?
Well, the legislature meets once every 2 years for 140 days. And it's often been said that they probably ought to meet for 2 days every 140 years. But at the same time, we always go running to Austin with our hand out. We get what we need. And truth be told, we get a tremendous amount of support from the legislature. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of legislators over the years and look forward to working with Kevin in the next session. Oftentimes we'll encounter statutes that require tune-ups. This last session, we attacked a handful of them. Improper photography was ruled unconstitutional. A guy could run down the mall with a camera up your skirt, and you had no right to privacy because you're in the mall. You're not in the bathroom. So we had to tighten up that. Anybody could talk any way they wanted to your 7-year-old online because it's free speech. So we had to tighten up that. So we have to go to the legislators occasionally and say, we need to make some hard choices here and craft language that's constitutional yet enforceable. So, we need legislators that understand our problems and are willing to work with us to come up with solutions. There'll be a tremendous amount of attention, as there are last several sessions, to marijuana laws. I'd like to say, well, it's just a little bit of marijuana. We're going to look over here. The law's the law. Which ones are we ignoring? So we're happy to work with diversion programs, but ultimately, somebody will have to decide. And then we'll enforce once that's done.
Two things. First, for those that don't know, APHIS means a fingerprint machine. I'll help you with that.
Thanks.
I'm excited that Captain Anderson's here with you. I've always disliked the limited purpose annexation and how it's confused a lot of things. And one of the confusions is knowing whether it's city of Houston or county. Cutton Road is city, for example. Have we gotten the geocoding down well enough now that everybody is not getting confused?
We don't have a lot of problems in that area. The geocoding area is our database that defines where that long address belongs in whose jurisdiction. And ultimately, we want to make sure that you get a response. We can sort out who's responsible once we get there. We just need to make sure somebody's on the scene. And the last thing any of us want is our dispatchers arguing about whose responsibility is. Let's get a cop out there, find out exactly whose it is, and we'll deal with the problem afterwards. We need to make sure you get service right away. So we are getting better at our tools, continually refined. So being able to draw a line down the middle of the street sometimes is absolutely essential.
Going back to the legislature, we were talking about the county being the same size as the city, about to surpass it. We can't make ordinances like they can.
That's right.
No.
Would that be something where the legislature could step in and help?
Well, and every one of those solutions is problematic. The county is in essence a large urban entity without that regulatory authority. And there have been conversations over the last several sessions about providing the county that regulatory authority. But when you do that, along comes a whole new layer of bureaucracy that commissioners have to deal with. We've seen limited opportunities there. They regulate alarms, they regulate massage parlors, they regulate a limited number of things. But the more you add to that, the more complex the bureaucracy becomes. So there's no area where you don't have a trade-off at some point.
Question regarding, you focused a lot on the medical portion for the inmates, and you kept saying it's the law, it's the law. How is it that, and I'll probably stir up some emotions here, but how is it that, a prisoner can get all the medication that they need, whether it's probably not generic, or can it be generic? And the reason I say this is I'm a parent of a disabled child, and so sometimes I'm very limited to things we can get because it's not in the budget, or this doesn't provide. But yet a prisoner can get 3 square meals and and top of the line medication, and it's the law's law. How can that law be changed?
Well, that's a complex issue. I will tell you, because it entails everything all the way up to the federal side, and we do use generics where we can. And you can imagine that I'm not a doctor, so I don't get to overrule the doctor's decision to use a generic versus a name brand. Like many people, I take cholesterol-lowering statins. And my doctor said, well, Crestor performs better at this level than the generic does. So I wind up having to pay more for the Crestor than the generic does. But, we do buy Abilify in large quantities rather than a generic. I don't know why. And I'm not allowed to question the executive medical director's decision because he's the doctor. Not even the state can question the medical doctor's decision. When he talks about a course of treatment, continuing course of treatment, they get to decide that.
And just on one other thing, when you say we pay for it. And when you say you throw out $1 million worth of food because they don't want the healthy stuff, can that food not go to a food bank or, you know, his homeless, you know, project? That's a lot of food that could go.
Believe me, I thought of that a long time ago, but we have to dig it out of the trash. You know, I take, just like Luby's, a tray
Yeah.
full of carts, you know, and I'd like to be able to say, well, I don't want that today. You know, like you let you custom order your own meal. But when you're delivering 9,000 meals 3 times a day, they all go exactly the same. They're on carts that are delivered, and you decide what you're going to eat. And what you do with what's left, it goes to the trash. So your cell, you know, area, whatever it is where you're served your meal. It's not in a cafeteria where you can pick up an apple somebody didn't want and give it to somebody else. That would be lovely. I got to mean, there's a homeless encampments not far. I mean, Salvation Army, all of those right around the corner. But unfortunately, I'd have to dig it out of the trash, and then you've got another cost to make it edible again, sanitary, all those things. Yes, sir.
So if I've got a serious medical problem and limited resources, my best bet is to get arrested.
I wouldn't say that people do that. They can't afford their meds. Yes.
Well, I was captain here of HPD, and you're familiar with some of the things that went on when I was on council, as far as moving HPD from a closet, it was over by Tuesday morning, to a large station with the help of Methodist Hospital and the chamber out here, because basically the city of Houston had not done anything for law enforcement out here, so we put in that big police station. What can happen, since both of y'all are here, to improve that relationship and work as one unit? You know, you're talking about combining a number of things, and so what else, with both of you here now, I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, what can do, and we ran Houston helicopters down 1960s, et cetera, to help stations out here, but what else needs to be done? We built that huge office over there with some of your men in that office, which was originally what I planned on doing. And someplace I read in the paper that Adrian was going to put a station out here. Did he actually do that on 249?
There's a substation.
A substation?
Well, we've had a substation out here for years on 249.
Yeah. Maybe he was just going to enlarge it or something. Maybe I don't know if he did or not. But anyway, my question is, how can we improve for those neighborhoods?
As our
that live out
continuing level of dialogue continues to evolve, then more of those things are happening. You know, there's just been some hesitancy in years past to really get engaged. You know, on a day-to-day basis, there's not a lot of overlap in what we do. You know, there are opportunities for us, particularly in the intelligence area and the analysis side, where we can see where the things that are happening in both areas that do overlap. You know, the problem that still exists is that we don't routinely evaluate that daily. You know, is his burglary in Willowbrook, the B&B in front of Macy's, connected to the B&B down here at North Oaks?
Yeah.
Nobody's looking at that. So we need to have those capabilities.
Now, is that computers would help? Or?
Yeah, and systems. We got a capital improvement project for $250,000 to buy a product from a company out of the Woodlands called Pear Analytics. And so if we can move to the next level of connectivity, then we can tell that system to poll both the county and the city when it's looking at things and making those relationships and connections. So as we look at, let's say we've got a potential description of the burglary motor vehicle in the parking lot at Willowbrook, and then you have a partial description of the one in North Oaks, compare those two, and have the system tell us when we have matches. We can identify trends and patterns, but we need things to make linkages between them. So as those systems and opportunities evolve, more of those things will come up. But you know, we have to start the dance first. You know, we've been on opposite sides of the aisle, but now we're together. So more and more of those things will come up. You know, just like the crime analysis that we do at the sheriff's office, we've not been sharing that with the constable's office. Why? We're looking for the same crime. You know, why not put that out there? So I'm going to work on putting a crime analyst at every station to serve both agencies. I mean, it's just good business practice.
Hi, how are you? I'm actually, my property is located at Mud 189.
I know who you are. I sent you money.
Yes, I know, thank you. I just wanted to say that
tell him why.
Okay, now you're gonna get it. The response time of the sheriff's department has improved tremendously, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank these guys.
So, I wanted to really thank you, it has made a world of difference, I haven't had to chase anybody on my property lately. No, but really thank you, it has made a huge difference, the residents are being educated a little bit more to please call as they see the crime, not 2 weeks later, or come tell me because I'm not a cop. So we have weekly crime watch meetings now instead of monthly, especially right now that we're going into the winter months with Christmas and the holidays. So I
Well,
just wanted to let you
I'll
know.
plug in, what I give her money for is a backpack program for
Yes.
kids.
Yes.
And she does a great job down there, and it's so beneficial to all of us, so thank you for it.
She is the most proactive department manager in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ron?
Chief Hickman, this is an interim position. When does it expire, and do you plan to run for re-election?
Either want to get reelected or they're wearing me out. They're working hard. Yeah, I'll be up for election next year like everybody else, which would have been my normal time anyway. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, what's your strategy for cutting the cost of overtime, putting aside closing one of the detention facilities? What strategies have you thought out, what strategies you can reduce that overtime?
We looked at a variety of things. Obviously overtime was one of the major irritations for us. We're $3.5 million over budget in overtime in the jail. And we look at the systemic problems that drive that. Some of it's population. Obviously, the configuration and the architectural design of the facility demands a certain level of support. But some of it is driven by the fact that we hired these 18-year-old kids, and I don't really want to do what they're doing. There's just nothing better. The oil field's down. I don't want to flip burgers. So I'll take this detention job. It comes with benefits. But, when I was 19 and my buddies were all out playing on Friday night, man, I'd like to be out too. Well, after you've called in sick enough times, you have to go on the Family Medical Leave Act. You don't get paid for it, but you get off on Friday. So I got to have somebody to cover your shift. So I said, Mr. Toyota, you're going to work a double. And pretty soon he gets tired of working doubles. His daughter got a soccer game coming up, or a birthday party, and he wants to take off. So I can't risk going in on Friday because I might get pulled in for overtime. I call in sick. So we create this cycle, and you can't get out of it until one of those 400 people decides they're not going to call in sick. There are only about 400 people that are really causing the problem. But that means I got to have 400 other people to work double shifts. We looked at realigning the shifts, 12-hour shifts, all kinds of different things. But every one of them has a cost associated with it, either more people or more money. And so right now, status quo is the best thing for us until we can find a way to get out of the loop. The first effort is to close Baby Baker and get off that overtime. That'll be a big hit. So we're constantly looking for solutions. I met with employee groups, and their feeling is that I caused the overtime. And I said, well, I've called in sick once since I've been here. Now, you could do the same. So we have a lot of dialogue, trying to figure out what we can do to solve that problem. But like anything else, where you go over budget, it becomes very problematic to other areas. So we're constantly looking for places to apply a Band-Aid. I've been through 3 different manpower studies since I got here 120 days ago, and so far none of them have provided a solution.
Here's the last question.
Oh, okay. I heard you talk a little bit about some of the systems, the paperwork that you all deal with. Have you all considered doing more online? That will really relieve some funding there if you go in that direction.
There isn't a soul alive who does online more than I do. Believe me.
Well, I heard a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, and all of those paper systems are being replaced, but that takes time. And we're buying a product called PeopleSoft, which is an enterprise countywide system, and we'll be the pilot at the Sheriff's Hall, but that takes time. But you can imagine how long it will take to scan 10 years worth of employee records when there are 5,000 employees.
You'll be very happy when it's done.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, believe me, my office was completely paperless. We were paperless with both of our courts, paperless with all of our files, so imagine my shock when I walked in. Yeah. So everything on the law enforcement side, all of our officers, all their interactions electronic. We have laptops in the field, a lot of that. The problem is internally administrative. That's taking time. I'll tell you that I canceled $8.5 million worth of contracts in the first 90 days to make sure that we were fiscally sound. I think the decisions that we make ought to be ones that if you looked at, you'd say, yeah, I'd have done the same thing. I canceled the contract for Mike Barber, the minister, because it was almost $400,000. I hired 3 people part-time at $145,000 to do the same thing. Now I have a person responsible for each of the facilities. They coordinate the volunteers. All he did was coordinate the volunteers. He's making $326,000. And he's from Dallas. So just good business decisions. You know, the jail management software that was supposed to provide us, you know, functionality and features was bid 3 years ago, and it hasn't been installed yet. Well, a lot's changed in 3 years. Why don't we stop, take a look, see if something's better out there? If those people have a better product, let them bid. But I think that our community, our business community, ought to have an opportunity to bid. We do construction projects, building projects, all kinds of things. So they ought to have an opportunity. So we went to court and told them if we're going to spend more than $50,000 on something, we're going to bid it, whether I have to or not. Time.
Let's thank our sheriff. Lieutenant Henry had a quick comment, please.